The Celtics just won a championship, and now they sever trading away one of their biggest heroes? Jrue Holiday is out. Anfernee Simons is in, and no one saw this coming. Just when Celtics fans thought they could relax and enjoy the offseason, Boston's front office threw a curveball that nobody saw coming. Jrue Holiday. Yes, the same Jrue who locked down opposing stars, sacrificed for the team, and helped bring Banner 18 to Boston, has been traded. The destination? Portland. The return? Anfernee Simons, and a future first-round pick. At first glance, it feels like madness. Holiday was more than just a role player, he was the defensive backbone, the steady hand when things got chaotic, the guy who didn't need the spotlight but always showed up when it mattered most. After just one season with Boston, a title, and a locker room full of praise, he's gone. This wasn't set just a trade. It was a statement. Brad Stevens and the Celtics front office aren't interested in nostalgia. They're not getting sentimental about championship parades, they're thinking cold, calculated future. And they believe Anfernee Simons is the next piece in a new puzzle. But the rest of the league? They were stunned. Social media blew up the moment the news dropped. Analysts questioned whether Boston was gambling too early. Fans were left wondering why fix something that wasn't broken. And then the whispers started. Was this really about Simons' upside? Or was there something deeper going on with Jrue behind the scenes? One thing's for sure, this wasn't a panic move. It was planned, quietly, carefully, and with one goal in mind: to keep Boston on top without looking back. On paper, it looks risky, but behind closed doors, Boston's thinking was all about timing and leverage. Jrue Holiday is 34. He's got a player option coming up, and with the rising cost of keeping a stacked roster, the Celtics had a decision to make: overpay to keep their aging core intact or flip a high-value piece while his stock is still sky-high. They chose the second option. Anfernee Simons may not have Holiday's playoff resume, but what he brings is something Boston desperately needs: youth, scoring, and long-term flexibility. He's 25, a 20-point-per-game scorer, and one of the league's most underrated shot creators. And unlike Jrue, he's locked into a manageable contract for the next few years. This wasn't a rebuild. It was a reshuffle. Boston looked at the future and realized something bold: if they don't evolve, they fall behind. The East isn't getting easier. The Knicks are surging. The Bucks are still dangerous. The Sixers might have their act together soon. And with Tatum and Brown entering their prime, the Celtics don't just want to stay good, they want to stay dominant. Adding Simons gives them more shooting, more offensive versatility, more ways to stretch the floor and punish defenses. But it also means losing leadership, grit, and a guy who's been through the fire. So the question isn't whether Boston got talent. It's whether they got the right kind of talent. And that brings us to the other side of the deal. For the Portland Trail Blazers, this trade was a rare opportunity. They've been rebuilding since Dame left, trying to mold a new identity around Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, and whatever the future brings. But rebuilding doesn't mean sitting at the bottom forever, and Jrue Holiday changes their timeline instantly. He sits not just a name, he sits a culture setter. Holiday brings elite defense, championship experience, and a veteran mindset that young teams desperately need. He doesn't demand the spotlight, he leads by example. And in a locker room filled with 20-somethings trying to find their place, that presence is invaluable. Scoot just got a mentor, a real one. Someone who's been through it, won at the highest level, and still plays with a chip on his shoulder. Jrue also gives Portland something they lacked: credibility. With him on the roster, they are no longer just developing. They are competing, and whether that means chasing a play-in spot or just raising expectations, it signals one thing clearly: the Blazers aren't interested in tanking forever. Holiday might not stay long-term. He could be flipped again for assets. But even in the short term, his impact will be felt on the court, in practice, and behind the scenes. And if he stays, he could help turn Portland's young core into something serious, faster than anyone thought possible. But while Portland adds veteran muscle, Boston is betting on a different kind of firepower. Anfernee Simons isn't just a throw-in, he's the reason this deal happened. The Celtics didn't trade Jrue Holiday for draft picks. They traded him for a weapon, and Simons fits exactly what they've been quietly missing. For all their talent, Boston's offense had one flaw: it was too reliant on isolation. Tatum and Brown can score, sure, but when defense is locked in, the offense got stagnant. Enter Simons, a shifty, high-volume scorer who thrives off the dribble, can shoot from deep, and doesn't need a play drawn up to get a bucket. He averaged over 21 points per game last season on a struggling Blazers team, often facing double teams with no real help. Now, he'll be the third option, sometimes even fourth, with wide-open looks next to Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis. That Sip's dangerous. He also brings something the Celtics have lacked: speed. Simons is explosive. He can push the pace, attack closeouts, and punish switches. Imagine the Celtics in transition with him on the wing. Imagine late-game sets where he draws the weaker defender and goes to work. And most importantly, he sits only 25. This isn't a one-year rental. This is a multi-year investment. He fits Boston's timeline. He grows with their stars, and he gives them an offensive ceiling they didn't have before. But here sits the catch. While Simons adds flash, Boston just gave up a lot of grit. And that brings us to the big debate everyone Sip's having. Did the Celtics just get worse? This is where things get uncomfortable for Celtics fans. Because for everything Anfernee Simons brings, youth, scoring, upside, the Celtics just lost their most reliable defender, their best communicator, and the guy who brought calm in chaos. Jrue Holiday wasn't flashy. He didn't drop 30 often, but when the lights got bright, he delivered. Clutch steals, timely threes, defensive stops when everything else broke down. He was the glue, the voice, the one player you trusted with everything on the line. And now, he sits gone. Anfernee Simons? He's never been tested like that. No deep playoff runs. No Game 7 moments. No defensive assignments against MVPs. In fact, defense is the weakest part of his game. That Sip's the trade-off. Boston just swapped maturity and defense for energy and buckets. And while that might work during the regular season, the playoffs are a different beast. Jrue was a dog, a foxhole guy. Simons is still trying to prove he belongs in the big moments. And in a city like Boston where banners are the expectation, that's a gamble. The Celtics are betting that Tatum and Brown can carry more of the leadership load now. That Simons' offense will cover up the loss of defense. That team chemistry can be rebuilt fast. But here's the scary part. If they're wrong, this could haunt them for years. Still, some fans believe this was the right time to roll the dice, and others, they're already lighting up the comments section. This trade doesn't just affect Boston. It sends ripples through the entire Eastern Conference. Because let's be real, when the Celtics move, everyone else watches. The Bucks, who already feel the pressure after their early exit, now see a version of Boston that might be more vulnerable defensively. The Sixers, depending on what happens with Embiid and Maxey, suddenly have a little more hope. And teams like the Knicks or Cavaliers, they're already circling this shift like sharks smelling blood. Boston might raise their offensive ceiling, but did they just lower their playoff floor? Think about it. Tatum, Brown, Simons, Porzingis, that's a ton of firepower. But outside of Derek White, who's guarding the other team's best player, who's stopping a Giannis drive, a Brunson post-up, a Halliburton pick and roll? Without Jrue, the Celtics go from elite on both ends to possibly unbalanced. This opens the door. Not wide, but just enough. Because in the playoffs, one defensive lapse can cost a series, and the rest of the East just got a little more confident. The Celtics are still contenders, no doubt, but the margin for error just shrank. And that brings us to the real question. Was this a panic move, or was it a dynasty move? This trade will be debated for years. If the Celtics win another title with Anfernee Simons lighting it up in the playoffs, Brad Stevens will look like a genius, someone who had the guts to trade a beloved veteran for a rising star. A mastermind who saw the game evolving and made the first move. But if they fall short, if they crumble in the clutch without Jrue's defense and leadership, this deal could become the what-if that haunts the franchise. Boston didn't just tweak the roster. They changed the core. They sacrificed certainty for upside, leadership for youth, defense for firepower. And that kind of gamble? It either builds a dynasty or breaks it. Meanwhile, in Portland, a quiet rebuild just added a finals MVP caliber vet. Whether Jrue stays or not, his presence shifts the tone, raises expectations, and accelerates everything. They may not be title-bound yet, but they're no longer playing the long game alone. Two teams, two timelines, one move that flipped the narrative for both. Because in the NBA, nothing lasts forever, not even loyalty after a championship. Just ask Jrue Holiday.